If you want to be the best possible pickleball player, then you need to study the game, whether that's to learn the proper strategy or technique. Today, I'm going to go through 7 highly effective techniques that you probably don't know. Some of them can be a little tricky, but if you can get them down, it can be a huge boost to your game. I've seen so many good players that don't know these, so make sure that you know all of them, because if you don't, you won't be playing to your fullest potential. The first technique that we're going to go over is the backhand overhead. So a normal overhead, you hit with your dominant side like this, right? But a lot of the time when you're playing in a game, your opponent will hit it over your non-dominant side or your backhand side, and you may not have enough time to get around and hit a normal overhead. Your first option, guys, is always to hit a normal overhead, even if you have to backpedal a little bit like this. But sometimes we can't do that, and that's where we need to use the backhand overhead, which looks like that. All right? Technically on our backhand overhead, we want to use the continental grip, and all we're going to do is stick our paddle up and hit the ball like this. There's a few different ways that you can hit this shot, okay? So if it comes relatively close to you, you won't need to actually spin around, and you'll actually just be able to stick up your hand and crush the ball like this, okay? I think if you're just learning the shot, you don't need to use too much wrist. But if you do start to use this wristy motion, you can get a lot more power, okay? But it's totally fine. I think it's actually better to start off using more arm and keeping your wrist steadier. On a really hard shot, if they go really far behind you, you may actually need to pivot your feet and make contact with the ball facing the opposite direction, which looks like this. One key thing is that when the ball's coming up here, you want to make sure to keep your eye on the ball the whole time, not turn around and look the opposite direction. Keep your head up until you make contact with the ball here. And like I said, you don't need to add on this extra flick until you really get the hang of it. If you get really good at this shot though, it's going to be a lot harder for your opponents to lob you, and you can be just as effective on this side as you are on your regular overhead. Our next technique though is in relation to our dinks. So a lot of the time on a dink, you're going to be very out of position. It's your opponent's job to try to hit their dinks out to your sides where they can get you off balance. So a lot of the time, particularly on the backhand, I see players get off balance and they flail at the ball with their wrist like this. But if you watch the best players, a lot of the time they're getting targeted to their backhand, and what they do to stay stable in this position is they actually set their wrist like this before they hit the ball. So they're not flicking at it. What they do is they set their wrist and they use their arm to get their power, okay? This makes you a lot more stable when you're off balance. You can do this on your forehand too. So if you're in a dinking rally, what you don't want to do when you're off balance is go for this flick, okay? That flick takes away all of your accuracy. So watch now. I'm gonna have that stable wrist where I set it before, and even when I'm really off balance, I have a ton of accuracy, and it makes me a lot more stable in these bad positions. If you watch Johns Set Dink, he does this very well. So this tip relates more to our defensive dinks where we're off balance. Our last tip though, we're talking more about being offensive with our dinks, so stay tuned. The next technique we're gonna go over is the topspin drop. So if you can do the drop, you've probably learned it hitting a slice drop where we come under the ball like this, and the ball spins back towards you. A topspin drop, however, is where we go over the ball and we make it spin away from us, which actually makes the ball drop a little faster. So this is a more aggressive drop. It's a little bit tougher to get the hang of, but if you can pull it off effectively, it makes it a little bit harder for your opponent to be aggressive because the ball doesn't sit up as much. To do it, we want to have our same drop motion where we're moving forward, getting our weight through the ball, but we want to brush up a little bit. I don't think we need to use wrist. We want to brush up a little bit, make sure that our paddle's going up as we're going forward. So it looks just like this. See, I'm getting under that ball, trying to get a little bit of topspin. Same idea though, making the ball land at the back portion of the kitchen. I think that the topspin drop's a little bit easier on the forehand side. Might be something that you have to practice a lot because it's not super easy to get the hang of. But if you can master this, guys, it'll be a huge boost to your game. I'm excited to give you this next tip though, which I've never talked about on the channel. And it has to do with defending a speed up. So a speed up is when a person that you're playing against is at the kitchen and you're at the kitchen as well, and they're transitioning from dinking to hitting the ball hard. So a lot of the time when someone's using a speed up, their sole strategy is to go right at your body. I'm sure you've experienced this. You've probably gotten hit before because of it. It's not fun. So how you can counter this is if someone is continuously targeting your body, right before they're going to go for you, what you can do is slide away to give yourself your backhand where they're going to go at you, and you can counterattack like that. This is something that you see pros like Colin Johns doing all the time. So let's say I'm playing Drew, and Drew's continuously targeting my body. How I'm going to respond to this is when I see that he's going to use a speed up, I see his backswing's a little bit bigger, I'm going to slide a little bit this way, so I give myself more space on my backhand side, and I can counterattack. So right now we're just dinking. I don't see that he's taking that big backswing. See there, I saw that he took that bigger backswing. I slide over a little bit, and that gives me the backhand to where I can counter, ideally at his feet. Be careful though, there are a few downsides of this play. You might leave a little bit of a gap wherever you slide away from, and your opponent might start to realize that you're doing this and take advantage of that. But occasionally if you use this, it can be very effective, so I highly recommend that you try it out. And if you struggle to beat bangers, this next technique I'm about to show you could be a lifesaver. And this technique doesn't even have anything to do with hitting the ball. It actually has to do with not hitting the ball. So if you're playing a banger and they're consistently speeding it up at you, and it seems like it's coming a little bit too fast where there's no way that the ball is actually going to be landing in, they're probably going to keep doing that. So what you can do to respond is just start sliding out of the way. And I guarantee you, a lot of them are going to go long and they're going to start to doubt themselves. So we'll show you how that looks. We're just dinking. Drew's going to speed the ball up. And I'm going to slide out of the way. That one went about 2 feet long, and I get a point. A lot of the time when you're playing someone like this, you might not really realize that they're gonna go long, and you could be trying to counter where it just seems way too hard. Sliding out of the way is the solution to that problem. Remember, if the ball is high, let it fly. And if you've made it this far in the video, I know that you're super dedicated to taking your game to the next level. So make sure to go deep into these next two techniques because both of them were some of the biggest things that helped me. Also, make sure to subscribe because if you're trying to improve, you want to make sure that you're consistently studying the game. If you're just aimlessly playing games every week, you're going to plateau. Don't let this be you, so subscribe and hit the bell. The technique that I'm about to go through could be the trickiest on the list to learn, but if you can learn it, it can be highly effective. I'm talking about the screwball return. So it's when you take a serve and you cut at it like this, which makes the ball curve like that, making the third shot for your opponent a lot trickier. Sometimes it'll even bounce off in a weird direction if you get lucky. So it looks sort of like this. So to recap on that technique, what you're going to do is you're going to have a continental grip and you're going to want to use a forehand and you're going to be cutting directly to the side as you're moving forward on your return. I'll show you how that looks in real time. So see how that ball sort of curved a little bit to the right? That alone can make the third shot for your opponents way more difficult. Some things to keep in mind though are that if your opponent's serving very hard, it could be difficult to time this shot. So I'd only pull it out if you have time and you're sure that you can make it in 100% of the time. You don't want to risk missing your return just because you're going for one of these screwballs. It'll pay off, but it's not going to make them miss every single third shot. So it's definitely not something you want to do unless you're sure you can make it in. And if you like these techniques, make sure to follow us on Instagram too, because every day we post tips just like this. Now we're on to my favorite technique of the day. This is something that you have to know if you want to be an elite kitchen player. So a lot of the time when you're playing someone with fast hands, it can feel like whenever you speed up, they cancel you with a good counter. So when you're playing these types of players, you need to be a little bit more cautious at what shots you go for. Some of the time though, you'll get a mid-height ball where you're unsure of whether or not you should go for a dink or a speed up. But because it's mid-height, you actually have a lot better of an angle to hit a very aggressive dink. Okay, so this technique is called the very aggressive dink, all right? So if I get a shot that's at about this height, instead of going for a speed up, what I can do is I can go for a very fast dink like that. So I'm not hitting it as fast as I'd hit my speed up, but I'm hitting it significantly harder than I'd hit my regular dink. So let's say I'm dinking and I get a nice, slightly higher ball. So instead of going for that speed up, I can go for that hard angle. And even if he does get that back, there's a good chance I'm gonna get a really high ball on the next one that I can actually kill. If you really wanna take your game to the next level though, This next video is about how you can improve without practice. So if you're sitting at home, you can actually implement some of these things right away.